It started with this disconnect, this non-alignment of history with my reality of mangoes and tropical islands and coconut trees and all of those stereotypes. There's a reality under those stereotypes. We exist. We're not some prison work camp descendants fumbling around in the dark. We pass stories down.
Welcome to Spirit and Liberation, the podcast where we bridge the sacred and the political, where ancestral wisdom meets the front lines of organized movement. I am your host, and my name is Jeanette Charles Marquez, and I am an organizer, historian, and IFA practitioner who is deeply committed to liberation. Today, we are in conversation with Caroline Meritobi, a visionary working at the intersections of law, indigenous traditions, and climate and ecological justice from Trinidad and Tobago. With over a decade of experience in public international environmental law, Caroline has been a fierce advocate for small island nations and indigenous peoples. Hi, Caroline. Thank you for joining us today.
Hi, thank you for having me today.
I want to ask you, what sort of context do you feel is necessary for folks who may not know much historically about Trinidad?
There's the usual history that you can find in history books and you can find online, and anybody can tell you, and they learned it in history classes. But that's important to know. Don't get me wrong. That's people, that's communities, that's history. But not a lot is known about the original history of Trinidad. This was the third place that Columbus landed, 1498. That's like 500 years. And I keep on saying this, that we don't know the impact of 500 years. And in a lot of ways, yeah, it has been ground out, due to genocide. So you're not going to see it in the same way when you go to North American Plain Indians reservations and you see a powwow, and you're not going to necessarily see the same kind of stuff. What you're seeing are different layers and levels of colonization. Settler communities have been here longer, so a lot of people had to hide. But what shocked me is that, for example, my family, we bought Carib, quote unquote Carib, which is what we say in Trinidad. And what my mother's cousin told me is like, okay, well, some people are 5 or 6 generations back, but we're actually 1 or 2. For me, it was shocking to just see how much was hidden in plain sight. And that's how indigenous culture is in Trinidad. It's hidden in plain sight. It's all of our Christmas. So many of our words, so many of the place names. My grandmother still had encyclopedic knowledge about the plants, about the medicinal value of the plants. It'd be this little innocuous plant, very humble, quite ugly, in the drain, in the gutter. And she'd be like, oh, this is so-and-so, and it's good for so-and-so, and so-and-so, and so-and-so, and so-and-so. Oh, my mom would tell me about stories where they'd go out wandering all day and they'd be eating this and that and the other. And that's how she was. And it was every fruit, every tree, every plant, like she was such a gardener, my grand, and I could go on and I could tell you how I fit the puzzle together of how much my life was guided by those principles without even fully knowing. I was so confused growing up. I was trying to understand. Like, I thought it was the Chinese side because she's half Chinese and half indigenous. And this is what made me realize that Trinidad is so multifaceted. It's so hidden. It's so layered that it's not a place to be taken lightly. It's not a place to be taken easily. You could live your whole life in Trinidad and there still are secrets that the island will not give up because it is that layered in history, and a lot of the history lives on in the people and in the memories because the overt signs of it have gone. So when people say that, oh, there are no more indigenous peoples in the Caribbean, I was like, no, we're still here. We're still here. We just maybe didn't want you all to know about it. Because as we look at what's happening in the world today, we see how powerful genocide is. We see how crushing and absolute it is, and how the settler societies and colonies that were imposed upon it literally root out anything that is left behind. And so to keep these things alive is a testimony, I think.
I feel like what I'm hearing from you that's really important is that in the Caribbean, even though people talk about Indigenous history as if it's a thing of the past, that Indigenous folks are still here and are still both culturally very important, historically very important, have power and have a presence, whether or not people are totally aware or conscious of that. And I think what is really important about your story and all of this too is how it led you onto this really unique path that you've been on as someone who is a lawyer. And I think for a lot of folks, they think about law as something that's incredibly rigid, right? Something that is really disconnected from indigeneity or even spirituality. And I feel like your approach to law is very much connected or aligned with more of an ancestral essence. And so I'm curious for you how your understanding of spirituality, ancestral traditions, and indigeneity have shaped you as someone who is now an attorney and also an advocate for justice here in Trinidad and the broader Caribbean.
Yeah, it is generally and usually, and I would say 99.9% of the time, a very rigid and inflexible career choice law. But I mean, that's how we look at it. What law is an agreement between people. I think what we need to understand, and what this epiphany for me made me realize, and 20 years of working on this, and then I've been reading about it since I was 10, because this is something I've been really obsessed about my whole life, is that it's all created. This is all the creation, the walls, the houses, everything that we stand upon is built. It's built upon what was the foundations of what was broken down of the society before. And that might have been built upon the society that was there before it, because we don't even have any records. So I want you to understand that this is not all that there is. And these laws were made by the settler colonies that imprisoned this island. I'm sorry, I'm going to have to be real. Let's be really, really real about what happened here. And this is what we're seeing now with Trump and Musk. So I just really want people to take that in. This is the end result of that. This is the end result of what I like to call shifting baselines of history. And it's something that I've been exploring because we have no concept of history. We thought that we came into this, Earth like about 6,000 years ago is when the Bible creationists like to talk about. And what there has been is there has been a destruction of all of the societies that can live with the natural world, because the natural world is being destroyed and they are being either killed or integrated and assimilated into society. So law for me is a construct. It is a social agreement that this society has decided to adhere to. I will be imprisoned if I don't follow them. That's what I think about this. I will respect them, don't worry. But that's not all there is. And if that's the case, then how can we use these laws that are here to benefit all of society? Because right now, it's not really happening, especially if you think that a bunch of people don't exist. So let's start there. Let's start recognizing them. But how did I come to this from law? I came to law from being a child with my nose in books all my life. And I understood post-colonial existence before I knew the term. I went to study that in literature in university because that's where my interest led me. And then I realized, hold on, nobody has told me about the actual full narrative of the cruelty and the brutality behind this, because they make colonialism sound so nice. These people were there, the Caribs, the Arawaks. The Caribs were mean. They ate up the Arawaks, chomp up the archipelago. And, Columbus came and saved them from themselves and gave them religion. And then we got schools and towns and roads and houses. And we were so lucky in washing machines, thank God. So it didn't make sense to me, reading this in a history book in grade 3 and thinking, wait, hold on, what? No, we're part Carib. What? No, we're still here. Like, what? And I think it started from there. It started with this disconnect, this non-alignment of history with my reality of mangoes and tropical islands and coconut trees and all of those stereotypes. There's a reality under those stereotypes. There's history under those stereotypes. We exist. We're not some prison work camp descendants fumbling around in the dark. We pass stories down. So when I went to university, I studied post-colonial Caribbean literature, looking at Indian subcontinent and African literatures as well, to like a kind of comparison. I guess I was looking at all my ancestry too, to find out where we had come from. And I just, people weren't very aware of at the time. This is the turn of the century, revealing my age, I know, whatever. But I grew up in the 80s. People don't really know. If you didn't grow up in the 80s, you don't know how racist it was. Okay, so that's when I went to law. My parents were lawyers. It was a field that I understood. And it was very depressing because it was all about money. It was about people doing horrible things to each other. It was basically just, the worst of humanity all in front of you. There was nothing building up. It was just tying people into money. And so I decided environmental law was the best place because that was where you saw countries standing up to bigger countries, LDCs, least developed countries, SIDS, small island developing states. That narrative was actually there. So I'm like, that's where I'm going. That's how I ended up doing what I'm doing. So I really brought what I did to law rather than, and forced law to conform to it. And I didn't know that I was on the edge of this huge movement. Like, I did not know that I was predating it by a decade at all. I did not know that this was where it was heading because at that time, there was no hope in those negotiations. I honestly could not see this happening. And I think the pandemic, the recent crises, now people are starting to kind of get it. More people are moving. But now you're seeing a backlash. And then you're seeing colonization of information again through disinformation and all of that kind of stuff.
I feel like what you're speaking into is really connected to what you're doing now. And this conversation around the fight that Indigenous peoples are at the forefront of in terms of the right to land, the right to exist, and really reconceptualizing or even reintroducing what societal contracts need to be. What is the foundation of how we want to operate in our own societies and in the world as a whole? I want to know if you can tell us a little bit about the work you're leading right now with the Institute for Small Islands.
Well, what I was doing before, and I'm still doing now, was advising small island developing states and least developed countries of the UNFCCC, the United Nations Framework Convention on Climate Change. And that's the big climate change conference that happens at the end of every year that you see on TV. So I did that for a good long while with British think tanks based in London, British Institute for International Comparative Law, Field Foundation for International Environmental Law and Development, and Legal Response International, LRI. And basically, I went to the negotiations either as a liaison or with these think tanks or with the government, my government, and advised either small island developing states or least developed countries or both of them together. So that took about a decade. I came back to Trinidad to have my family and I started the Institute for Small Islands because I didn't think I could do that here because it just wasn't a thing then. I was trying to take Indigenous peoples to the UN and I was working on the ground with Indigenous groups, with Maroon groups, and they really had very different ideas of what they wanted. And the United Maroon Indigenous Peoples, Kila Jaramogi, their focus was going to certain negotiations and dealing with Indigenous issues. And I worked on the environmental aspect of that. It was a team, it was a very beautiful team. And we worked on the Maroon gatherings. And so it was a different angle. And so what I did was try to integrate these elements as we went along and sow seeds. And so we did a lot of work on the ground with communities here. But what we're really trying to do is organize. And so we're working on a platform. I'm still focused on the environment and climate change and environmental negotiations. And one of the things that we're really working on is a platform. We're starting an Indigenous Leaders Fellowship, and the focus is on youth, but it's really for any age, as well as an environmental fellowship where we're going to work on a platform to address multilateral environmental negotiations and other Indigenous negotiations and collaborate as a region to say what we want. And then we're bringing it to other groups around the world. We've been doing this Legal Advice Center for 9 years now. And it has been mostly the work that we've been talking about, but that's where we would do work on the declaration stuff or the legal documents. That we wouldn't be doing the admin work through the Legal Advice Center. It's exclusively the legal documents that we help on or we work on, or speeches and things like that. But we've also been doing litigation. It's not remaking the wheel. It's strengthening and giving capacity to what is already there. I think what a lot of people want to do with Indigenous peoples is swoop in and tell them what to do. Here's how we can save you. And I think, honestly, the best way is just to go to them and say, what do you want? What do you need? How can I help? Where are you going? And also make sure you're talking to the right people. You have to find out who the elders are. What are the hierarchies of power? And most people will take you to them. And then you have to see that there's a community that is respecting them. So these are people who have been betrayed. I'm not even going into into historical parts. And so you have to be very careful. You follow UNDRIP, United Nations Declarations on the Rights of Indigenous People. And that is a declaration that will stand you in good stead. It will tell you about FPIC, which is free, prior, informed consent. It's a whole body of law, whole caseload of law. You will not be proficient on it overnight. You will not be an expert overnight, but you can glean and understand how you need to start appreciating the complexity of dealing with a sovereign people.
So what I'm hearing is there's a few layers to this work, which is very intentional accompaniment, deep listening, and a humble understanding or approach to working with sovereign nations and sovereign peoples who have their own structures and understandings of the world and cosmologies. And that with the skill set and the training and the knowledge that you have, really trying to support and complement whatever it is that they're trying to fight for, right? One thing I want to follow up on is this other kind of aspect, which is kind of the role that Indigenous and ancestral practices and these kind of traditional knowledge systems around the environment and land, what role they play in protecting small islands as well from climate catastrophe and climate collapse right now.
Ooh, that's a big one. That's a heavy one. And this goes back into the recognition of plural societies with their own cosmologies and cosmogonies. But you have to realize that Indigenous peoples across the world, not just in the Western Hemisphere, have a very different relationship with the land, with the earth. They are our friends. We talk to the plants, we talk to the animals. I saw it in my mother and my grandmother growing up, and how I was that child kissing the flowers and talking to my dog. But beyond that, it's understanding the forest the way you would understand a city, and it spreads for miles. And we feel that we are part of the earth. So where you can cut down and bulldoze with impunity in the Western culture, everything has significance here. And so I don't even know how you get past that, to begin to appreciate that ancestral practices and traditionally called ecological knowledge play a role in protecting small islands from climate collapse. We will never understand that until we drop every pretense of knowledge and try to understand that each plant has significance. And if you're going to move it, there is a consequence. Is it a consequence that we can live with? How is it going to play down the role for 7 generations? And if you do take a plant, you have to thank it. You have to thank the tree. If you take something from the tree, you have to thank the tree. And they're your friends, you can hug them, you can say, thank you, baby. It's a conversation you have. It's not even, and I'm totally westernized. So this is me saying this. So, it's not like I've grown up in the forest, but I understand because I was raised to see plants in a different way. My grandmother, my mother, my great uncle, we had a different relationship with plants. And this is why I'm saying I see this across the world. So how can we do that for the future? I get frustrated when I'm in the climate conference and we're talking about environmentally based adaptations, and then everyone's like, oh, environmentally based, so what is it? Traditional ecological knowledge, and let's get this. Y'all don't even understand how to approach it. Even in trying to save the world and save forests, you're doing it through a market. You can't offset an orchid. You can't offset a panther. You can't offset a central mother tree that has been there for thousands of years and is feeding thousands of trees. It is not possible.
So if we were led by a spiritual worldview, how do you think we could shift the path that we're currently on right now in regards to climate catastrophe and climate collapse?
It's like the Hopi tradition says, and if you don't know what the Hopi tradition is, go and look it up. It's on YouTube. It's so beautiful. At the beginning of it, you're seeing how they predict the UN. They predict the car when they're saying then there's a beetle traveling along the road, and then later on you realize it's a Ford beetle. Oh my God. And then the beetle takes off and it becomes a bird, and that's a plane. And then the House of Micah, when the House of Micah is built, then we can speak. When UN was built, then you can speak, because how are you going to speak? Who are you going to speak to? You're in a prison. You're in a prison matrix, a prison military industrial camp of the United States of America. And then they talked about the bombs, the gods of ashes, and that was like a nuclear bomb, so it predicted the nuclear bomb as well. And then we're going to go, there are two paths that humanity will go on. One is death and destruction, and one is saving the earth. And I think that is where we are at right now. To be very honest, I feel like, how can we significantly shift the path that we're on to climate catastrophe? I think some of us are taking that path to doing it. Some of us are not. I think that there's a lot of disinformation going around. When the internet came, the people who had been historically oppressed, they started to speak. They started to speak their stories. And this was around the time of the pandemic when people started to listen. So who was listening before? Only their own people, other brown peoples, other global majority, but the Western readership wasn't listening. So nothing was moving, and Trayvon Martins were being killed. But, it was during the pandemic when George Floyd died that everybody started to listen and look and learn. And that's when there was like, ooh, DEI, we need to focus on, okay, ESG, okay, because of the Paris Agreement from 2015. ESG was in the mix, yay, we doing stuff, we working on it. And then all of the climate catastrophes were happening. So that's when all of these people started telling their stories and singing their truths. And I think it really, really, really panicked the forces that be. And a lot of that disinformation out there is to deal with that. So you can only get your news from one place. You can only get your historical information from one place. Now we are at a time where we have to really look for the information. Don't receive what is just handed to you. Go and search. And the books, historical books are a problem too. So if you know information, start publishing. Because right now we are in an information war. And I think that is where that answer lies. Whether we go on the Hopi path of destruction or the Hopi path of survival.
What you're demonstrating is just how everything's really interconnected, right? If we were just to look at the last 5 years, right? Thinking about the pandemic as this catalytic moment for not just humanity, but for the earth as well. And how you mentioned where this is a time where folks are able to sing and say their truths in many ways, and that there are not just millions, but billions of people listening. And we also saw ecosystems return to a different degree of not just survival within this like global capitalist system, but entire ecosystems on land and sea kind of reintegrate in their natural flow. How you're mentioning everything from the environmental connections to Black Lives Matter and George Floyd, and how people started to mobilize in ways that actually were directly challenging the status quo and directly challenging these systems. And so for someone who is committed, right, to exploring these issues, what advice do you have for them?
In the words of very wise Trinies, I would say, settle down now. Humble yourself. Catch yourself. This is a different world you're about to approach. Go with extreme humility, because there's a lot that the society that you have previously been part of for all of these years have done to these societies, whether you know it or not. And learn as much as you can. Listen as much as you can. And there is something around the second or third year where you will start to feel something Buddhists call spiritual bypassing. This is the halfway up the mountain kind of thing where you feel that you have reached the top of the mountain and you know everything and you are an authority. You are not an authority. You will not be an authority for many, many, many years. So humble yourself, stand back. You are a child. I'm still a toddler. I know not that much, and I'm okay with not being a knowledge holder. I'm okay with letting knowledge come to me in small doses because I'm not ready for it. I still think in very Western ways about work. So I will want to use that very interesting tidbit in my book, but it's not mine. It's not mine. I can't use it. Being Indigenous is not about the individual. It is about the community. It is about right relations. It is about moving forward with the earth, moving forward with the community. They will want to be your friend. They will want to see you and chat with you and talk to you and invite you to their house. Are you ready for that? It's a beautiful relationship, but you have to treat it specially. And then what are you doing with it to protect the culture? Anything that you do with that information should not be making money for you and you yourself and you. How are you protecting the culture? How are you protecting the people? How are you making money for them? How are you helping them increase their capacity to make money? Because you can't build a cashless society in this day and age without cash, because we've just ruined the environment so much. We have to build stuff back.
Thank you so much, Caroline, for everything that you've brought to us today in your spirit, in your presence, in your teachings. Thank you. And just such deep appreciation to you for all the work that you're doing here in Trinidad, but also in relationship to so many other places in the world. And I know whoever listens to this will be very inspired to chart their path and to continue their path along very similar teachings. So just thank you so much.
Thank you very much. Thank you for having me here. I really, really appreciate this.
Hi, this is Francisca Porchas Coronado, and I am here to offer you some guidance on how to do your morning prayers. We're all spiritual beings having a material experience, and we're so much more than the terrible things that happen to us, and so much more than what the system of oppression, the oppressors, and society tells us and reinforces about us. Reminding ourselves of our power, worthiness, and divinity can fortify us and also the collective. So these are just some tips on how to do morning prayers to the universe, your ancestor, or your guiding spirits, whoever it is that you pray to. Part 1, you begin with praise, and you can say the following: I give praise to the universe. I give praise to Mother Earth. I give praise to all of nature and its beings. I give praise to my guiding spirits. I give praise to my ancestors. In this particular part, you can name some of your ancestors that you want to praise by name and be as specific as you want to be. I give praise to all that came before me in this struggle. Here you can also name some of your heroes. I give praise to my elders. You can also name your elders here. I give praise to all those who have cared for me, protected me, guided me, supported me, loved me. And here you can also name very specific people, and some of them might be the same ones from some of the earlier categories. Part 2, you move to gratitude and giving thanks. And you can say it in the following way: I thank you for allowing me to wake up this morning. I thank you for my breath. I thank you for my body. I thank you for my journey. I thank you for those who brought me into this world. I thank you for all the basic necessities that are met for me on a daily basis. And here you can name any of the basic necessities that you have that many times we take for granted, from the sunlight to water to the food on our table or to the soil that produced it. You can also thank the universe for the clothing on your back, your home, your means of transportation, your job or your income, anything that you can think of that helps you facilitate your daily life. You can also say, I thank you for my family, and you can name each and every one of them or as many folks as you want. I thank you for my community and friends. Again, you can name here whoever that is, whether it's comrades, peers, friends, people in community that you're in. I thank you for my elders. You can name them here as well. And lastly, you can say, I thank you for whatever it is you're thankful for. Maybe there was a special thing that happened the day before that you're thankful for. Maybe there was a big challenge that you were able to avoid or overcome. Whatever that is, this is an opportunity for you to say thank you. Part 3, forgiveness. Here you can say, forgive us for the harm we do unto you, whether that's Mother Earth, whether that's the water or living beings, nature, whoever you consider or whatever you consider as the creator or creators or stewards or guardians of the world that we live in. Also, you can ask to be forgiven for any harm that others have implicated you in or that you have implicated yourself in. Also, you can forgive yourself for resentments that you have around certain situations that happen, certain decisions that you made, certain sadness that comes up when you think about the past. Forgiving yourself for thinking that something should have been different, but it was not, or someone should have treated you differently. Whatever that is that you want to forgive yourself for, whatever mistakes, whatever self-doubt, whatever it is, this is an opportunity for you to also speak forgiveness for yourself. And part 3, this is an opportunity for you to ask for protection and also for special blessings. Protect me or us from death. Protect me or us from sickness. Protect me or us from litigation. Protect me or us from loss. These are the 4 big challenges that most beings face in the world. And that's why there are those first 4, according to my tradition of Ifa. But you can name whatever it is you want to be protected against. It doesn't have to be those or in that order. And lastly, you pray for what you want and be as specific as you possibly can. Here's a guide. I pray for long life. I pray for good physical, spiritual, and mental health. I pray for a cool head and coolness in the world. I pray for fortitude. I pray for resiliency. I pray for clarity. I pray for courage. I pray for self-love. And the list goes on. You can pray for whatever it is that you want. The ones that I listed are pretty general, but you can be very specific. Maybe there is an opportunity that you really want. You can pray for that. Maybe there is a relationship that you really want to salvage. You can pray for that. Maybe you are low on financial resources. Pray specifically for that and for how much you need. Sometimes we can pray for financial resources, and my elder used to say, and you'll find a penny on the ground, but that's not really how much you need. You need much more. So pray exactly for what you need. Put it out into the world. We believe that our breath carries energy, and we believe that we have the ability for a voice to manifest along with our actions. So that is a guide for your morning prayers, to set your intentions, but to also ask the universe, your ancestors and guiding spirits, for what you need, give them praise, and have a humbling moment around forgiveness. Ashe.
Thank you again for joining us today on Spirit and Liberation, brought to you by the Latinx Therapists Action Network. And a special thank you to Caroline Mayer-Toby for her insights and reflections on the struggles facing Indigenous communities in the Caribbean and beyond. If this episode spoke to you, please like, subscribe, and share it with someone in your circle. Spirit and Liberation is hosted by Francisca Porchas Coronado and Jeanette Charles Marquez. Today's episode was produced and edited by Phil Circus.